Ian Bauke,
Here.
and Chair Rodriguez.
Present here.
Thank you.
Now, I would really appreciate it if now, just before we go into any changes to the agenda, I would like each member to take less than a minute to please introduce themselves to Ian. And maybe Ian could say a little bit about himself as well. And just kind of do a little get acquainted. We haven't been together in person for a very long time. And I'm sorry about that, but this would help us get acquainted with Ian. So maybe Andres, you want to go first? We'll just kind of go in order of the membership list.
Sure, happy to. Ian, welcome. Nice to meet you, and glad to have you aboard the committee. Andres Malabos, committee member, born and raised here in Santa Barbara. I've always kind of had an interest in what goes on behind the scenes with public works projects, and I've spent plenty of time on two wheels, so safety becomes a paramount concern, and so this was a good opportunity to volunteer with the city and hopefully make those little improvements around the city to make streets safer for everyone. So welcome aboard.
Well, thank you. Okay, how about you, David?
Hi, Ian. Good to meet you. I'm David Collum. In my day-to-day life, I'm a software engineer, but I joined this committee. I've been serving for about 2 years. Like Andres, I spend a lot of time on two wheels, bicycling, motorcycling. I'm a runner, and I've lived in a lot of larger cities with different scales of public transit. And so it's something that I have a lot of passion for, and that I have a lot of interest in helping to see done right. And so I joined this committee with the intention of hopefully being able to contribute. So good to meet you, and welcome aboard.
Okay, Susan, would you join in, please?
Okay, hi, I'm Susan Horn, and my career has been in public health. And one of the things that I did is in working with public health was getting more kids to walk to school instead of being driven to school. Walking and biking would be increased. And so I worked on 3 different grant projects working with the school, La Cumbre Junior High, and with the neighborhood and with the city, getting a grant from the state, 3 different grants over 6 years to completely change the configuration at Modoc and Portezuelo. Thank you. Which was really dangerous, and now it's like really much safer. So, and was very complicated, but that was very satisfying. I loved working with transportation and safe routes to school and walk to school day and all of that. And so that was part of my job. And now it's part of my retirement hobby, now that I've retired from public health. And welcome. Welcome, Ian.
I apologize. I'm getting over a cold. I'm going to mute when I can. Hillary, please, would you share?
Yes. Hi.
Thank you.
And hi, Ian. I'm Hillary Blackerby. I've been on the committee for, I think, 12 years now. That's possible. But at my day job, I work at MTD and work on transit, but I get around all kinds of ways. Bike and walk and drive and take the bus. So it's always interesting, and I think this committee, we get to see a lot of cool things. And if you're on for sort of any length of time, you get to see them from, idea to funded to designed to constructed, and it's rewarding. So welcome to the committee.
Okay, let's see. Oh, well, Ian, you get to share a little bit, if you don't mind.
Yeah, of course. So great to meet all of you. I'm really excited to be joining you. About me, I'm from Santa Barbara. Went to Santa Barbara Junior High, San Marcos High School.
I went to school in DC and graduated not too long ago. And, I also got to see kind of a different, environment where lots of transportation options were available. And, I'm just really passionate about making as many options possible available for Santa Barbara's to get around, ideally without a car if they can. So yeah, I'm just really excited to be a part of this process and learn from all of you and, work on some good stuff for the public. So thank you.
Make sure I'm unmuted. It's, well, I'll wrap up. Hillary and Susan have been on the committee longer than I, but it's been a pleasure to be able to have that continuity. And I, excuse me, I come from a public health perspective. I was a clinical administrator at various clinics throughout Santa Barbara for about 25 years. And my real focus is public health, a lot like Susan's, my focus and reason for being on Transportation Committee. And I was very happy and fortunate to be on a committee that advised for the general plan, the current general plan, to ensure that health goals were included in the general plan for the city of Santa Barbara. And that includes goals to reduce obesity, hypertension, diabetes, and several other things. But a lot of it relates to how we get around, whether it's cars or bikes or having excellent pedestrian services. So that's what motivated me to get on the committee, was being involved in the general plan. So anyway, and I've loved it and I'm still here. Okay, now are there any changes to the agenda?
Madam Chair, no, there are not.
Okay, then we do have a small public comment opportunity now. If anyone in the public has any, they can speak for up to 2 minutes on a topic that isn't already listed on the agenda for tonight. So are there any public comments requested?
Hi, Madam Chair. This is Michelle, and I see that there are 4 attendings, but currently nobody has their hand raised. But if you're listening as an attendee, you can see the how to make an oral public comment on your screen. And if you'd like to make a comment during general public comment, you can select the hand to raise your hand, and then I will be notified that you would like to speak, and I will give you that opportunity. But saying that, Madam Chair, I still see nobody has raised their hands.
Okay, they probably will for specific topics. That's great. All right, moving on, we have some announcements and an introduction and some recognitions, several items. Jessica, are you gonna
Yes, I
handle
first
those?
wanted to, Madam Chair and committee members, good evening. I'm Jessica Grant, Supervising Transportation Planner and Staff Liaison to the Transportation Circulation Committee. I do have a few announcements. I did want to start with the introduction of our new Public Works Director, Cliff Maurer. Cliff, if you are on, please turn on your camera to say a few words.
Thank you, Jessica, and good evening, Chair Rodriguez and Transportation Circulation Commissioners. Before I give you just a quick introduction on myself, I just want to thank all of you. It was great. Commissioner Bakke knew that I got to hear about you, and I really appreciate your commitment to this committee and to the city and everything that this committee represents, because it truly is important. So just from my perspective, thank you. As Jessica stated, I am the new Public Works Director. I've been in the seat since August 9th. I was a career naval officer in the Civil Engineer Corps for a long time. And upon retiring from the Navy, I was hired by the city of Coronado, to your south, as the Public Works Director there. I served in that position for 7 years. And my personal opinion, probably the three highest priorities of the residents and businesses of Coronado, probably not too dissimilar from those of Santa Barbara. They were maintaining the historic and cultural significance of the city, the neighborhood feel, transportation, traffic, and mobility issues, and then, believe it or not, trees. I never thought that the community would elevate trees, urban forests to that level, but they certainly did. But yeah, so I'm very familiar with the topics that you're addressing on a regular basis. Are very important. As you know, I've inherited a great staff here who are passionate about what they do. So I think I've said enough. If anyone has any questions of me, I'd be happy to answer it, but I am going to stay on for the entire meeting, and I'll look forward to working with all of you in the future.
Great. Oh, I see a question.
Hi, I don't see a way to raise my hand digitally, so I'm just waving. But Mr. Maurer, I can't see your face because your name is across your face and shoulders. Could you possibly turn your screen a little bit so that we could see your face? You're way low. You're way low, and there's lots of wall behind you that we can see. Lots of wall. I just don't know if you can.
Yeah, the picture I have on my screen.
There, that's perfect. That's
Okay.
great. Thank you.
Yep, absolutely. I apologize.
Well, appreciate the irony for that, because our new public works director is very tall. So it's funny to hear a comment that he's very small. But thank you, Mr. Maurer, for attending us with us tonight at this meeting. I also have the honor to do some employee recognitions as well. And I want to first start with the recognition of Rob Dayton, who was the transportation planning and parking manager for the city, and wanted to mention not only his 30 years of service, but in his most recent retirement. But just to say a few words, he's been a true visionary for the city. Well, I will not go into detail of Mr. Dayton's accolades. Please know that behind all the sidewalks, multi-use paths, bike lanes, street corridors, roundabouts that you experience on a day-to-day basis, Rob has had his footprint in that. And while there's still so much to do with our local street network, Rob has made a big footprint with respect to active transportation infrastructure projects. And Mr. Dayton's contribution to the city isn't all just about active transportation. Rob was also very instrumental in strengths coaching in the city's executive team, public works department, and many other city departments on how we could really be the best that we could be, both professionally and personally. Mr. Dayton will be missed, and we wish him all the best in his future endeavors. I also want to honor Mindy Jackson. Mindy, if you can, turn your camera on. We want to recognize her 22 years of service with the city of Santa Barbara. She has served many administrative teams within the city, and with transportation planning and parking being the most recent work section that she's worked with. And just want to thank her for being our administrative liaison for the Transportation Circulation Committee. Not only did she help our group, but as well as the Downtown Parking Committee. This is Mindy's last meeting with us, and I definitely wish her all the best. Thank you, Mindy.
Thanks, Mindy.
Thank you. I'll miss you guys, but I might tune in now and then to watch the meetings.
Please don't, for your own sake. Enjoy retirement more than watching it. Congratulations.
Yes,
Thank
and
you
then
so much,
I
Cindy.
also have two more announcements. If Matt Four could turn on his camera. Matt is a longtime employee with the city of Santa Barbara, and he is going to be assisting our transportation planning and parking division as we go through an organizational reorganization. He's holding an interim position, and I'll give it to Matt to describe a little bit about his interim role. Mr. Four.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Ms. Grant. Good evening, Madam Chair, committee members. It's a real honor to be here. I am serving in an interim position now with, as you heard, very, very big shoes to fill and to follow in the footsteps of with Mr. Dayton's retirement. Mr. Dayton was a personal friend. He still is a personal friend of mine, and you know, my respect for him is couldn't be more. But in the next few months, while the Public Works Department goes through a bit of a realignment, and as we recruit for the permanent position to fill this role over transportation planning and downtown parking, I'm stepping in to help on an acting basis. A little bit about the reorganization. It's still managing transportation planning and downtown parking. We've added a little bit of nomenclature to the title in that it's a downtown cross-functional team manager. And what that really denotes is setting a strong foundation and the structure and the machinery in place for all of the dynamic work that's coming. I mean, everything you've been a part. You've had a big influence on the changes of downtown, on the plaza, with transportation and circulation, with downtown parking and its evolving role. And the purpose of this position is to, in the near term, work very closely with the economic development manager, with community development in the master planning process so that Public Works is well represented and has a voice at the table and can advise. And to set the stage of having this interdisciplinary team of cross-functional talent so that as projects and vision become material, concrete initiatives, we'll have the people and the cross-functional relationships into place to put those visions into concrete actions. So from the day-to-day perspective, what will you see as a change? Not a whole lot. You'll still see transportation planning, you'll see downtown parking, and we'll continue to do our jobs. I think what this really signifies is a forward-looking positioning of all of the different positions in Public Works and Streets to be able to affect the visions that are ultimately put into place. So, so for the next several months, I envision working with, as Mr. Maurer said, one of the best teams in the city. I've been with the city of Santa Barbara for 11 years. I've worked, I was the environmental services manager, did a short interim position in the city clerk's office. I've worked for the past 5 years in the city administrator's office, and 2 of which I just came out of a 2-year temporary assignment as the director of information technology. So, so I cannot perform traffic studies myself, but I have a lot of experience navigating through public processes, and I hope to be able to help Ms. Grant and all of the other staff to be successful, or to continue to be successful. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Four. And one last announcement. You may have seen in your email about a week ago, we did have our virtual community meeting on the Lower East Side community connectivity plan to look at ways to strengthen walking and biking connections from the east side to the waterfront, and potentially looking at a pedestrian bicycle overcrossing from the east side over approximately to Dwight Murphy Field. Again, we had the community workshop this past Monday virtually. We will continue an in-person workshop, more in an open house format this Saturday from 10 to noon at the Franklin Center that's in the east side. So please reference your email for details. Anybody joining us on the call as well, there is a website for the effort. And I think that is it for the announcement. So back to you, Chair Rodriguez.
Chair, I was wondering if I could make a quick MTD announcement.
Certainly.
Yeah.
Recognizing Ms. Blackerby.
Thank you. So just so folks know, Santa Barbara MTD has a survey out right now. If you visit sbmtd.gov/MTD moves ahead, or if you just go to sbmtd.gov, something will pop up to take you there. We're undertaking a new 5-year short-range transit plan. And so this is the first phase of getting input people who take the bus and people who don't take the bus. So you probably fall into one of those two categories. But it's important, and the survey's only open through Sunday night. So encourage folks here and anyone watching at home to take that to weigh in. That'll inform a robust planning process over the next year. Thanks.
Thank you. Unless there's something else, I think we can move on to approving the minutes from our last meeting, which was in June.
Madam Chair, I move.
Any second?
I second.
Susan raised her hand. Andres spoke, so I'll just Andres whatever.
I'll
Yeah.
take the roll call
Okay.
vote.
Thank you.
David Collum,
Aye.
Blackerby,
Aye.
Malavos,
Aye.
Horn,
Aye.
and Chair Rodriguez.
Aye.
Thank you.
Well, I think we'll move into program updates. We have a lot of very interesting material to cover this evening. Just a reminder to all of our attendees to have your cameras on, your committee members, have your cameras on and your microphones muted, and then we will unmute when we do questions and comments, but that will be after public comment. So I think it's Jessica,
Yes.
I believe.
Thank you, Madam
Okay.
Chair. For
You're
the
welcome.
The updates for the active transportation program for cycle 5. As I've mentioned in past meetings, we did receive funding for one of our projects for Upper De La Vina buffered bike lanes and safe crossings, and that is in the vicinity of Cottage Hospital area. So we will be moving forward on that design effort soon. And the others, we were potentially hoping for, there was potential for 500 million in augmentation funds. And that we had 2 of our projects that were just missed the mark by 1 and 2 points. We were crossing our fingers that there was potential augmentation funds with the approval of the state's budget. Unfortunately, that did not come to fruition, and those funds reverted back to the state's general fund. We don't know yet. I'm still paying attention of how that's going to continue to play out as we go into the new year. but it is not likely that we will receive those funds. If there are any additional funding, my guess is that it would move into the next active transportation program cycle, which is cycle 6. And that will potentially open this coming March for grant opportunities and close in June of 2022. There's going to be a series of workshops that our team will be attending, and I think we're hoping to repackage some of those that we're so close to the mark as a cycle 6 application. So we'll continue to keep you posted on that effort. Thank you.
Sorry, I was muted. I apologize. Get confused. Well, thank you. I mean, the amount of money
Are you
is
open for
staggering, but oh yes, certainly. Wait a minute. Do we have any public comment on that? That was just a report. I don't think so.
Hi,
Do
Madam
we have
Chair.
any public comment?
We have no
No?
raised hands at this time.
Okay, terrific. Sorry, Susan. Okay, yes, questions from any committee member?
Jessica, thank you. Jessica, this is a question about Lower De La Vina, that is toward the harbor. A friend of mine that lives down there was telling me last week that they're doing some kind of work on the street or just on the curbs with ramps like on the curbs or something. And I hadn't heard anything about that. And I just wondered if that's part of like, you know, deferred maintenance or, you know, what is that part of? Do you know?
I actually I saw Mr. Bailey beat me to it. So we'll have him explain what's going on.
Madam Chair, Committee Member Horn, good evening, Derek Bailey, and I'm with the city's Street Operations and Infrastructure Management Group. The streets is just finished repaving West Ortega Street. So they were doing some maintenance, pavement maintenance near the intersection of De La Vina Street and Ortega. Bookend of that corridor is part of the city's West Carrillo Safety Project. There are new curb ramps being built at the Carrillo De La Vina intersection, and the tactile truncated domes were just applied this week, so those are just about complete. The paving will begin this weekend. The active transportation Lower De La Vina project will be going out to bid later this fall, and that's going to include curb extensions at all the intersections between Carrillo and Haley Streets, and ultimately a road diet going down to one lane when it's repaved next summer. So that's all coming up in the near future on Lower De La Vina Street.
That's what I wondered. Thanks.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions from the committee on this cycle 4 and 5 update? Well, I think we could move on to item 4, as indicated on my screen. Project and program status from the big 2016 Bicycle Master Plan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll be giving this presentation this evening. And the purpose is to really receive an update on capital projects and programs identified to be implemented as part of the 2016 Bicycle Master Plan. For many of you, a lot of these projects will look familiar, as you have seen a lot of these projects through various meetings since the Bicycle Master Plan was adopted in 2016. That said, it has been 6 years since the plan's adoption, and we're at a good point to recap what has been done to date and what changes have occurred to our bike routes. For background, the city's first bicycle master plan dates back to 1974. The next major update was done in 1998. And then the latest bicycle master plan update that was reviewed by the Transportation Circulation Committee and was also adopted by City Council in 2016. The 2016 bicycle master plan had a lot of robust community outreach. Here were our major takeaways from the community at our various neighborhood summits that we had, various public meetings, etc. What we really heard from the community is enhance safety for all road users, close gaps in our network, improve existing facilities and enhance those routes, improve connections across the 101 freeway, create strong east and west connections, have better connections to schools, and increase safety at intersections. These were the community development goals that are listed in the plan. Again, safety for all road users, closing gaps in our bicycle network, really looking at when we develop projects that we look at them holistically for complete streets for all road users, from pedestrians, bicyclists, and drivers. And really that any infrastructure we work on really has that unique Santa Barbara style. So in the bicycle master plan, there were 35 projects that are referenced, either completely new projects or to enhance existing routes. And these were all to be implemented over time with 3 primary phases, each of them being approximately in 5-year increments. So phase 1 being implemented by 2020, 2035 or 2025 for phase 2, and 2030 for phase 3. And it was really not necessarily in the ground, but all funding secured, designed, ready to go. And this list is referenced in your attachment 1 of your staff report. And subsequent to the adoption of the bicycle master plan, City Council had adopted the Vision Zero strategy that aims to eliminate all roadway fatalities and severe injuries in city roadways. The map on your right is the collision heat map that was done over a 10-year period from 2008 to 2017. Color on the map represents that there was a collision in the roadway. The darker the color, specifically red, would represent a higher level of collisions in those areas, and so forth. What we can tell from this collision data is, when we dive into it further, that pedestrians and cyclists are disproportionately affected in our roadways with respect to severe injuries and fatalities. Because pedestrians and cyclists are our most vulnerable road users, government shares the responsibility for safe streets. And these are the 23 corridors where our most serious collisions and fatalities happen in the city. And we have really been focusing our efforts on these areas where there are repeated collisions. The reason why I'm bringing this up is because some of the locations were not necessarily referenced in the bicycle master plan. But as through various collision studies and recognizing patterns, there are certain projects that we needed to elevate ahead of some of our other projects. And now I wanted to show you a few examples of that. This is the Vision Zero US 101 State Street Undercrossing project. It's currently in final design. The project provides a critical active transportation connection between the downtown and waterfront neighborhoods. The undercrossing was originally constructed by the Caltrans Crosstown Freeway project in 1991. Unfortunately, the undercrossing has the highest concentration of serious injuries to pedestrians and cyclists in the city. And improving this safety for this active transportation users is definitely a priority of ours. The project does reallocate space through the undercrossing to improve safety and rebalance space for vehicles, pedestrians, and cyclists. With the new configuration, bike lanes will be increased from 5 to 7 feet with a 2 to 3 foot buffer. Sidewalks on each side will be widened from 8 feet to 14 to 15 feet. And the proposed roadway will be reduced to 1 lane in each direction, plus a flush median for emergency access. And will also include reconfiguring turning lanes to accommodate traffic's turning movements at both Yananali and Gutierrez streets. Now, I also want to give you another example, and that's the Vision Zero Chapala Street paving project. We saw this project at our last TCC meeting in June. And just to recap for this one, after Vision Zero collision analysis was done, there was a pattern of broadside collisions with vehicles. And to address this, what was recommended was to do a lane reduction on this one-way street between Mission and Mitchell-Torrena streets. So when we looked at a lane reduction, there's 2 ways you can do repurpose the roadway. So you can either add buffers indicated in the right-hand side to buffer against existing on-street parking, or you can add a bike lane. In the case of, for Chapala Street, it really made sense to repurpose that space to a bike lane as it connects to the existing network. One other thing for the project, not only will it benefit drivers and then have an extra benefit to add a bike lane, the project also benefits pedestrians as well. So when we think of our network and complete streets, one of the items that this project will eliminate is the multiple threat at crossings. So instead of having 2 lanes on the one-way street, it's reduced to 1. One of the things of concern when we have 2-lane one-way roads is if a pedestrian is walking across and the vehicle stops, there is a point where there's a blind spot where another oncoming car or coming through the intersection may not see the pedestrian. So that's another thing that that particular project addresses. So now getting back to the implementation of the Bicycle Master Plan. In your attachment, we have a detailed update for each project. I will highlight the projects in the context of what were sort of the lower cost projects to implement that were synergies with our pavement maintenance program. And then what were some of the higher cost projects we're fortunate enough to implement as well because we had received grant funding. So let's start with some of the lower cost examples. This was one of the first projects since the implementation of the 2016 plan, and it's the CODA protected bike lanes that were completed in 2018. It was the city's first protected bike lane connecting the east side to the downtown from Milpas to Chapala streets. This project did also involve removal of an on-street parking lane. Another project that was implemented was in the Lower West neighborhood of the city on Rancheria Street. Before, cyclists had to share the road with vehicles. We were able, again, with a paving project to have an on-street bike lane installed. There did have to be parking removal for one side of the street. And another low-cost project was another synergy with the 2019 pavement maintenance project, where there was an opportunity to look at Cabrillo Boulevard. with the Vision Zero collision analysis, there were collision patterns of speeding vehicles in this section of roadway. Again, this is in the vicinity of the East Beach volleyball courts, Andrea Bird Refuge area. And again, we saw speeding vehicles and then an issue of U-turning vehicles for those that were parked in parallel parking spaces adjacent to the East Beach volleyball courses and then doing U-turn movements. The original approved bicycle master plan did have a proposal to have 2 on-street bike lanes. But with the collision analysis, we determined that one of the eastbound lanes could be removed, and we were able to repurpose that space with a buffered bicycle lane, as you see in the picture to the right, and change the parking configuration. This was the city's first back-end angled parking that was installed. And while this is not a photo specifically of on Cabrillo, it just shows the benefits for when you have back-end angled parking, because as opposed to parallel space, because the driver, when they're about to pull out of the space here, they have a good line of sight for the oncoming cyclists, and vice versa, the cyclists have a good viewpoint of drivers to know if there might be a conflict between the 2 users. So let's now go into the higher cost improvements. I do see one question.
Want me to go ahead?
Yeah, we can. I was going to go through the rest of the presentation, but if it was specific.
What was specific to that is just what have you seen as are there collisions lower number? What are the results of that, of those improvements?
Thank you, Committee Member Horn. Yes, we have seen lower collisions here. There was initially one collision recently after the installation of the project, but since then there has not been any collisions that I'm aware of.
You're talking about the beach.
For the improvements on Cabrillo. So on all of them, let's see, and I could have Mr. Bailey come on too if we wanted to address the CODA bike lanes. Derek, if you could confirm for me, and as well as the Lower West neighborhood along Rancheria.
Yeah, great question. There have been no collisions that we're aware of on either CODA or Rancheria streets. There were several collisions on East Cabrillo just immediately after the installation, but there haven't been any in the last year and a half. It's been about 2 years since that installation took place. So it seems like there was some just getting used to the new configuration out there, but we're really encouraged that there haven't been any collisions in the last year and a half.
Great, thanks.
Okay, so I will move on now to the higher cost improvement projects. These could not have been done without grant funding. The specific sources that have been great for facilitation and implementation of bicycle master plan projects have been Measure A, which I'll discuss at another presentation this evening, the active transportation program, as well as being like the 2 primary sources that we're very thankful for, because for those committee members that have sat through all of our capital planning presentations, we have very limited funds in our streets transportation capital budget. And so if you want to ever do anything new or even a safety project, they really are grant dependent, and then we can use what's left of our remaining street funds as potential matching funds for those various grants. So I did want to highlight the Las Positas multi-use use path project that is currently under construction. It is a 2.6 mile path starting at Calle de los Amigos and Modoc Road, going along Modoc Road to go to Modoc and Las Positas, and then heading south towards Henry's Beach. And so it's been really exciting to watch the construction for this project. This is actually a 1974 bike master plan project. So, but the cost was so high, approximately I think we're at about 16 million for a construction cost. And, you know, when we have our capital regular budget that only has 3 million to have for the city each year, projects like this aren't possible. So we were so beyond elated to receive grant funding, not only for design and environmental, but then a subsequent grant for actual construction with the active transportation program. Again, this is just an image from on your left of the existing roadway, which now looks different because it is under construction. And then what the future would look like on your right-hand side. And again, it provides a separated path for cyclists, walkers, runners, etc. We still maintain the on-street bike lanes as well. This is just another view along Las Positas Street, Las Positas Road. And here's another view as you approach Elings Park. So major work will be wrapping up in the next few months on this project, and can't wait to see it in operation. Besides it really being a local connection, highlighted in blue here shows the 2.6 mile route. But it is a critical piece in the overall regional network spanning from Goleta all the way to Ventura, and what a critical piece. Next is that we were fortunate to receive grant funding for is the East Side and West Side Paseos. When we reference it in our bicycle master plan, it's fragmented into smaller projects. When we work with some of our grant sources and really to be transformational, we oftentimes combine the smaller pieces into one giant, two giant grants in this case. But really it's to provide strong connections in the West Side neighborhood, and then from the West Side into downtown, and then vice versa in the East Side to have a strong connection on Aliso Street, which is a parallel street to the very busy Milpa Street, to have bike-friendly streets there. And then connections from the East Side also to downtown, and then a connection to connect both the East Side and West Side neighborhoods. So when I referenced our community goals of really strengthening those East-West connections, right now, the strong connection is just our Beachway. And so this is an in-town route that will be connected, which again is very exciting, planned to be under construction approximately in spring of 2022. And then there's the downtown De La Vina Street, safe crosswalks and buffer bike lanes. Mr. Bailey just mentioned that in the announcements. This is another one that is headed for construction in spring of 2022. It will have a lane reduction on the lower part of De La Vina between Carrillo and Haley, and we'll have a buffered bike lane. And also with those arrows just represent that we're going to have stronger crossing connections as well for pedestrians. That will be curb extensions. we are fortunate to have a synergy grant with this one that's also implementing good street lighting along this corridor. Again, how I talked about the double or multiple threat issue on Chapala Street, that project will solve. It's the same issue that we experience on here. Again, when we look at Vision Zero and collision patterns, this is another highly prone collision pattern street. And so again, in this image just shows where the pedestrian's walking across the street, but had there been another car approaching that may not see this oncoming cyclist. So again, now cyclists and pedestrians only have to navigate one lane of roadway. This is a picture from when the buffered bike lane ends at Haley and De La Vina. Then there will be a buffered bike lane installed in this connection to connect it to downtown to separate cyclists from the very busy vehicular traffic that we see here. So those were just some of the highlights of the projects that we did receive grant funding for. In addition to the capital projects too, there's also a programming side to our bicycle master plan. Just wanted to highlight a couple of those programs. The first being Safe Routes to School. We've worked with Coast over the years. We have contracted with them to be our liaisons for a Safe Routes to School education in our schools. And that could be everything from school safety assessments and helmet fittings. You see in the picture here, they're doing some blacktop, about to do some blacktop safety drills, etc. We do know just the heavy lift that it takes for all of this education. We did recently increase some of the funding contract, also paying into Coast for their programming efforts in education too, is our sister cities, City of Goleta and County Santa Barbara, City of Carpinteria, that we're all involved in together in good Safe Routes to School education. And we also have continued cooperation with Coast and SB Bike, and I'm not sure how many people know, but Coast and SB Bike just recently merged together. So I try to use them interchangeably, but now they are one. They're still working on a name for the organization, but they're really instrumental too in our grant application preparations and getting letters of support, but also doing all the school tallies and everything else that go into these massive grant applications. They're also assisting us with Vision Zero messaging, and they provide great input. We often meet out in the field to look at different intersections or roadway segments and how really to best design them for all different ages and abilities. The next major program, super excited, is the BikeShare pilot program, which BikeShare is a point-to-point transportation option. The program launched of January 28th of 2021. And I won't say anything more because I know Mr. Furtner has an amazing presentation for you, updating you on this program effort. So what the next steps are is through some of these capital projects and through some of the Vision Zero projects, we've had some minor changes to our bike routes, and we need to get that reflected and updated in our GIS records. So this will be a part one of part two. We'll come to you in 2022 with what the updated bike route map is, and then again, what the actual addendums will be to the bicycle master plan. And we'll continue on the projects that have not been funded to date on the list of our projects that we're still actively trying to seek grant funding. I think the big takeaway for me, especially being a planner and working on planning efforts, that so many times when you have a plan, then the plan just goes on the shelf. And that's it, because there isn't any money for to implement. And really for this, we've been really fortunate to activate it immediately. So it's really exciting. So that concludes my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Chair, I have a
Jessica?
couple questions.
Excuse me, just a moment. Do we want to take any public comment, or do we want to do questions from the committee first?
Chair Rodriguez, up to you. We can do questions and then have a break for public comment, and then come into if there's any comments that you have when we go into sort of the second meeting to in the future in 2022.
Perfect. Okay, so be aware that your comments can be saved, but questions are appropriate right now. Just a reminder to the committee members. Thank you.
If you don't mind, I guess I'll get started. Jessica, I'm just curious, having looked through what the original master plan was in that attachment we received, and given the status that you gave at the beginning, that from that 10-year period, 08 to 2017, about 10,000 incidents between vehicles, pedestrians, cyclists, and about 350 serious injuries between vehicles, pedestrians, and cyclists. Do you have any like year-over-year metrics to indicate that the bicycle master plan is making improvements in that area? I'm also curious, one of the stated metrics, and obviously not everything is necessarily implemented in a timely manner, but one of the stated metrics was increasing the number of bicycle commuters from to 10% from 6.1% and reducing bicycle-related collisions by 25%. I guess that plays into the original question, but how has the progress on those metrics been going? And then, you know, given, I understand this is the bicycle master plan, but there's been a lot of overlap with pedestrian safety. So have you seen measurable improvements in that regard as well? So a few questions there.
Yes, so thank you, committee member Column, for that question. I think when we analyze traffic collision data for bigger reports, it's typical to be done in about 10-year increments. So if you implement, say, year one off of that, then you're still in that next 10-year increment. So it will still pull in collision data that existed before that improvement. So it actually takes about 10 years from when we have said improvement to then forecast over that decade, did we move the needle? So as Mr. Bailey mentioned, I think there was a question and comments during the announcements with, or I'm sorry, for the lower cost projects that we've been able to do with Synergies for Pavement Maintenance, we have seen in the short term improvements. We just want to be analyzing if those still hold true in the long term.
No, I'm sorry. I really do understand that. And especially with the injuries, given the low number, I mean, averaging what, 30 a year, that's not necessarily statistically significant. It feels to me that if you're talking about 10,000 incidents a year, that are year-over-year numbers never calculated? I mean, are those really not considered at all relevant?
Oh, I'll let Mr. Bailey, yes, answer that one.
Yeah, that's a great question. We do track year-over-year collisions for both pedestrian involved and bike involved. Just looking at them right now. Bike involved have been trending downwards over the last 10 years. Like 10 years ago, like around 2011, 2012, they were somewhere in the 110, 130 range per year. And the thing to understand about collisions too is one year you might get 100 and the next year you might get 150 for reasons we can't explain. There's been no changes to the network or anything like that. So there is variability in year-over-year collision data. The past several years, we've kind of been in more of the 90 to 110 range. So things are trending down very slowly. But as Ms. Grant mentioned, it's we've had a few Vision Zero bicycle master plan projects implemented over the last few years, but we really don't have solid after data yet. And there's only been a few projects, so they're not yet moving the needle citywide that we want to. You know, there's some really transformational projects that are going to come online over the next 12 to 18 months. And we're really hoping that those projects moving forward is really what starts to move the needle for us. For pedestrian involved, pedestrian involved collisions have been pretty stable over the last 10 years. 2020 was a bit of an anomaly just because traffic patterns were quite different with the way people were moving around with COVID. But 10 years ago, we're in like the 70 to 80 range, and now we're in the 60 to 70 range. We really started getting aggressive about our crosswalk improvement safety projects back in like 2012, 13. There was a young man killed on Milpa Street, and that really rallied the community to demand safer crosswalks. So that's something that's been, we've been working on in a while. It's frustrating for us that the numbers aren't coming down. But what we are noticing that's happening is 10 years ago, we used to have what we call hotspots, where pedestrian involved collisions would be concentrated at particular intersections. And because of all the crosswalk work that's been done with a lot of the pedestrian activated flashers, curb extensions, those locations are all going down pretty significantly. But what we're finding is the collisions seem to be spreading out throughout the city. So there's no real hotspots anymore. There'll be one over here, one over there, and it's kind of adding up to the same amount that we had in the past. That's more challenging to address. Obviously, we can't re-engineer every street in the city. We can still do really good projects on the high-risk corridors, but we're going to have to rely on education and police enforcement in order to make really network-wide changes, because we can't re-engineer every street in the city.
All right, thank you, Ms. Grant. Thank you, Mr. Grant.
Thank you, Ms. Grant, for the presentation. It was very interesting, and I'm still learning a lot of this stuff, just being appointed, and a lot of the terminology. I had a couple project-specific questions that you went over. I don't know if you can go back to the underpass, like on State Street in the presentation. But I just read in the staff report, it said that the bike lane is going to be a protected bike lane between Gutierrez and Unali Street, and just the rendering of it on the presentation. I don't know what the terminology exactly is for a protected bike lane, but then later in the presentation, you had one on Coda with kind of the poles that separate it from the drivers. So I'm just curious, is this going to be the final project, or is it going to have a physical barrier in between?
Thank you, Mr. Bucky, for your question. Yes, it is. Thank you. To be observant, we do not have the bollard in this illustration, but there will be bollards. They will be a little bit different from the ones on Coda Street. There will be more similar to one of the bollards that you might see on State Street right now that's in that interim configuration. It's a little bit beefier type of bollard, and then there will be some reflective tape on that. But yeah, there was a history of broadside collisions. So this is definitely, it will have protected lanes in this section.
Okay, great, thank you. And then real quick on the MoDOC Los Positas multi-use project. I live right over there, and I see it every day. I'm really excited for it to be completed. I'm just curious, the path that's separated with the parkway, so that's shared between cyclists and pedestrians together, even though there's the bike lanes on the street, right? Okay. And is there going to be any sort of, I'm just curious in general how these things go. Is there going to be any sort of signage or anything about kind of how to safely share that small space between pedestrians and bikes who might be going a lot faster? I'm just curious.
Thank you for that question. Yes, it will be a shared facility. Similar to what you see on the Beachway. Again, if you're a very confident cyclist, that then what we would probably see the higher speeds on the on-street bike lanes. This is not meant to be a speedway on the multi-use path. It's meant to be for all ages and abilities. Mr. Bailey, did you have anything else to add?
Yeah, no, I think your comparison to the Beachway next to the Bird Refuge is a really good one, where the higher speed cyclists like to stick to the road. They don't want to mix with people in strollers or beach cruisers, that sort of thing. The path that's being built on Las Positas and Modoc is going to be slightly wider than the Beachway. The Beachway is about 10 feet wide. This is going to be about 12 feet wide. Standards have been updated since the Beachway was built. But Ms. Grant, I think you got it there.
All right, thank you so much to both of you. That's all I got.
We're open for more questions. Hillary, did you have?
Yeah, just
were you
when you
asking?
piqued my curiosity, Jessica, when you said the type of bollards. Are we talking the yellow ones or like the chess pawn kind that are currently on stage?
It's sort of like the chess pawn kind.
I love them.
On State Street. Yeah, I think, Mr. Bailey, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think, I'm not sure if we landed on a color yet, if it was black or not. We're in the final design, and I actually plan to look at the final drawings tomorrow on the spec. But Mr. Bailey, do you have, did we reach a color determination?
I think the intent was to do a white with a white reflective strip. So it would be the same as the ones that are on State Street, except those are black with a white reflective strip, but it'd be the same shape.
Nice, great. They're so reflective. They really show up well. So that's great.
I do
Yeah,
have
we're
one
pleased
in
with
my office that I can do a show and tell if I can run and go grab one real quick.
Yes, the city of Los Angeles uses a similar type of bollard on all of their protected bike lanes. They've been putting in a lot of protected bike lanes. There it is. But what they're using down there, same manufacturer, is just a straight up and down bollard. It doesn't have any nice shape to it. This manufacturer does make this more decorative style, which is more appropriate in Santa Barbara.
Do we have any more questions before we move on to the next topic? I'm just want to comment that this is a huge plan, huge project, and I appreciate the highlight summaries, but I'm really grateful that Susan and Hillary and I have all really been hearing about this from its inception. It's really nice to have the overview because it's a lot. It's a huge, huge, wonderful project.
Chair Rodriguez,
Susan?
I did want to prompt for public comment if there wasn't any further questions, unless Ms. Horn had a question. If not, then we can go to public comment.
Well, that's what I was
Okay.
seeing. Any more, Susan? Ms. Horn?
Thank you.
Okay, now take it away.
Since I live on Modoc, I've been noticing that there are some piles of dirt moving on the landscaping strip that's between the road and the multi-use path. And I'm just wondering, so is that actually landscaping starting? Are they going to plant some trees, or what's going to happen on that?
I'll take that one. Great question. The work that's been done recently is actually for the biofiltration areas. You'll notice there's little notches that are in the curb on the street, and that allows stormwater to run off into the street, into the parkway. The areas that they dug out have specially engineered soil that are more absorbent than the regular soil that was out there. So that's what you've seen to date. What's yet to come on Modoc Road is the parkway landscaping. The parkway tree designation out there is oak trees, so the Modoc Road is going to be lined with oak trees, and there will be some low growth shrubs and some boulders in the parkway along Modoc Road. So that's going to be coming up. Just for everyone's information too, the paving of the remainder of the path is going to commence on Monday. So starting next week and probably for about the next week and a half, the remaining areas of the path are going to be paved.
Okay. I do have one other question, which is that I hear from residents around here is on the Calle de los Amigos, is that how you say it? Where the bike path starts. That road was really narrow at the entry to Modoc, and someone told me that they were digging it all up and changing it all around, and I just wondered if you had an idea of what happened with that intersection.
Yeah, great question. The Calle de los Amigos intersects Modoc, if you can see my hands, kind of at an angle like that. It's not like a true 90 degree. It's kind of at an angle like that. And the way that the construction turned out, making that right turn from Calle de los Amigos onto Modoc to come back into the city is more than 90 degrees. And we did notice some people were having challenges with that. So we did pull back the curbs out there by a few feet on either side just to improve maneuverability. We also noticed challenges too with the buses getting in and out of there. So that was another reason to make changes at that particular intersection. We did get a lot of questions from people about why wouldn't we allow 2 outgoing lanes for all the intersections coming out of Hidden Valley approaching Modoc. And it's really a safety issue. What we don't want to happen at this path, the safety is most important, is one driver pulling up to the path, say they're turning left, and another driver turning right, coming up, making a California roll type stop, and rolling right past that vehicle that stopped. And meanwhile, there's pathway activity right in front of them. That's quite a big safety issue. So that's why the intersections out there were configured just with the one outgoing lane.
Thanks.
Okay, do we have any more committee questions? Well, if not, yes, it's time for public comment on this presentation. Michelle?
Michelle, you're muted.
Thank you. Madam Chair, yes, we do have 4 members of the public attending, and we do have 1 person with their hand raised. So I will go ahead and give Barry Remis the cue. And Barry, I have unmuted you, so you have 2 minutes. You may go ahead and speak.
Well, good evening. Thank you, and I hope you can hear me pretty well. I'm doing this through the computer, not a phone call. Madam Chair and committee members, and welcome to Committee Member Bauke, also our new Public Works Director, and also to Matt Fore to the scene. And I want to also thank, just regarding some of the lower cost projects, I also want to thank you, Mr. Bauke, for raising a question about the protected bike lane underneath the overpass, the 101. This is such a really great project. The design with Mr. Jeff Shelton's architectural beauty incorporated into it. And what's really great is the fact that we're addressing one of the Vision Zero high collision corridors. So to be able to see the rendering with the bollards that are going to be in there too, with the chess pieces, I guess, as we call it. And while I guess it's not, you know, if we're really, you know, trying to address a high collision corridor that would see hopefully a reduction in both pedestrian, clearly with the separated sidewalk areas, but also this, particularly with the bike lane, and trying to mitigate bike collisions with motor vehicles. While in a perfect world, perhaps we'd be looking at some type of hardscape or landscape separation for physical separation. The chess piece bollards are a great start. Well, hopefully that we'll see that that'll be a good mitigation for collisions, especially at night with high reflectivity. So that was great. And also on the East Cabrillo Boulevard, the road diet that was performed, Coast was an advocate for that. We're really happy to see that everything has turned out really wonderful there. We're not seeing enormous backups, and the improvement to cyclist safety with that back end angle parking is great. Yeah, of course, we still see the occasional people that are pulling in instead of backing in, and enforcement there could be helped, but we realize that we have resource constraints with our enforcement and our police department. So just wondering about in the future for it would increase signage be helpful there to get the message across. But we really want to acknowledge and thank the transportation staff, of course, for all the great Vision Zero work that's been done, and we're looking forward to future rollout and outreach messaging with the Vision Zero initiative. So thank you.
Michelle, do we have any other speakers, public speakers?
Hi, Madam Chair. Thank you. That was the only member of the public that has their hand raised at this time.
Well, at this time, if any committee members would like to make some summary comments or statements, I think that would be great. Anybody who wants to go first? I'm seeing Susan and Hillary at the same time. So Susan.
Congratulations. It's fantastic to see the follow-up. Great work.
Hillary.
Agree. I second that emotion by Susan. I think you've got a lot to be proud of, and what Ms. Grant said earlier about a lot of times plans just sit on the shelf and go, well, I wish we could, you know, fund this or get this done. Or, you know, even more cynically in some jurisdictions, we did it, so leave us alone. We have a plan, even if we don't try to implement it. So a lot to be proud of, really great work. And, you know, one item that I would hope on the, you know, I know this isn't explicitly about Vision Zero, but, you know, without Vision Zero, I think we would not have been as successful as we are so far with these projects. And it mentioned Vision Zero messaging. I know that that's, you know, one of the E's is education in Vision Zero. And that's something that I'm looking forward to seeing more of, more education. I know we've been dialing in some of the engineering pieces, but I think, you know, a real public campaign about Vision Zero and what it is would be great. I think a consultant was working on that a couple of years ago, but haven't really seen anything public. So I hope that we get to see that, so we continue to make the case to the community about why it's important to be safe in our own behaviors to make these projects really as successful as possible. So congratulations, and let's keep it going.
Do we have any other? Sure, unmuted. Do we have any other committee members that would like to say anything about this update? I do have one question. I know a while back, I can't remember which year, those of us on the committee at that time received a hard copy of the bicycle master plan. There were some available. And if there are any still around, I know it's been modified, but it might be very useful for the newer members if they would like to have one, to be able to get one.
Thank you, Chair Rodriguez. Yes, we do have some copies still available, so I'd be more than happy to give a hard copy to any member that would like. And as a reminder too, we also have it available online as well.
Well, we have our souvenir copies, which we enjoy. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, shall we move on to hear from Sam, Mr. Fertner, about the pilot bike share program? Yes?
Good evening, Chair Rodriguez and committee members. My name is Sam Fertner. I know some of you on the committee, but it's actually been almost 2 years since I presented before you, so definitely some fresh faces. Looking forward to a future where we can all meet in person again. But for the interim, glad to be here. And tonight I want to provide an update on the status of our bicycle share pilot program, some of the implementation and operational challenges, as well as talk about the ridership statistics that we're seeing and then next steps for the 3-year pilot program. Next slide, please, Jessica. So stepping back a little bit, bike share in Santa Barbara was really meant to provide a point-to-point transportation option. This option should be something that can reduce traffic, has the potential to reduce parking demand for those people that would prefer to drive, should be affordable, and it should provide access to key destinations. Bike share really, just to sum it up, is something that is a great resource when it's a little too far to walk, but maybe it's also a little too close to drive. Next slide. Bike share has been asked for in Santa Barbara for over a decade, but it was recent council direction back in 2018, 2019 that really got us to where we are today. As I mentioned, bike share was discussed in the general plan from 2011, was also discussed in the bicycle master plan from 2016. I'll get into some of the reasons why it hadn't happened yet later in the slides, but the intent again is for the city to help offer a more sustainable transportation option. Next slide. In looking at the bike share timeline, as I mentioned, it's been a decade in the making, but ultimately back in 2018, we started to see some rogue launches of kind of the early wave of shared mobility. Here in Santa Barbara, that looked like scooters being dropped on the street in downtown, to which council responded with an urgency ordinance to do kind of a short-term governance of shared mobility. That later developed with staff refinements into a shared mobility ordinance for the city that came online in 2019. And the intent of that was really to regulate scooters and all forms of shared mobility moving forward. But at that time, council also told us, we want to see what bike share could look like in the city of Santa Barbara. We want to try this and see if it's a good fit for the city. So with that direction, staff went out and created a request for applications. We received 3 applications from different bike share vendors. We created a bike share selection committee comprised of members of the city of Goleta, UCSB, partners at SB-CAG to help process the results and take a look at these different vendors and what they might offer for the city, and ultimately returned to council in December of 2019, where B-Cycle was selected as the permitted operator for the 3-year pilot program. From December 2019, we got into 2020. We had been hoping to launch in order to coincide with Cyclemania of that year. And then COVID happened. And that definitely slowed down operations on the bike share front. In addition to that, the permitting processes and the city review to get bike share locations approved proved to be pretty lengthy. And in the midst of all that and COVID happening, we miraculously were able to launch B-Cycle in the city of Santa Barbara on January 28th of 2021. So about a year from council selection of B-Cycle as the vendor. Next slide, please. B-Cycle was really chosen for their proprietary 3.0 dock and the platform of their bike share operation. So this is what you're looking at here. This is a 3.0 installation on State Street, and this is a bike share dock that doesn't really fit with what a lot of other bike share, especially docked bike share companies are doing. This is a standalone dock. It actually communicates via M1 CAT connection, so similar to a cell phone. And it allows you to walk up, unlock the bike, and check it in at the same dock via a smartphone or an RFID card. B-Cycle was really unique in offering this hardware, and they also were offering an all-electric fleet, and they were the only vendor to do that in the RFA process. This bike share platform is built on the 3.0 dock and these Bosch-powered, really bomb-proof, municipal-grade bike share bikes. They're produced by Bosch. They're covered in anti-theft hardware. They've been holding up fairly well in the municipal bike share world. In looking at the program as a whole with this system, we hope to see 500 docks and around 250 bikes spread throughout the city. Next slide, please. We're going to play a quick video on how to actually check a bike out from a dock and how to return it. I apologize in advance if the sound comes on. It can be a little challenging. Okay, thank you. So that was just a quick way to walk committee members through the process of checking out a B-Cycle if you haven't had the opportunity to try one. It's fairly straightforward. Generally speaking, I would say that the hardest part is getting the app installed on your phone. So in looking at building a bike share network throughout the city, staff and B-Cycle have developed a number of parameters for installation. These are really the top three that we stress in identifying a new station location. That we maintain existing pedestrian through zones on sidewalks, ensuring that we have sufficient space for all members of the community to use the sidewalk and that bike sharing is in no way impeding on that access. Generally speaking, the 3.0 docks are mounted to existing hardscapes in the right-of-way. Usually affixed via anti-theft hardware to concrete. We have done some asphalt installations as on State Street. So we have a few in-street locations that are a little bit different. And then we've also recently begun implementing some base plate locations. The location you'll see on the lower right is actually at the Santa Barbara Harbor. We liked the location. It offered some access to key destinations while being out of the way. But buried immediately under this bike share station is a fiber optic cable about 4 inches below grade. So a base plate, which is a weighted freestanding bike share station, enabled us to implement a station here without actually permanently affixing to a concrete or asphalt substrate. And lastly, again, looking at where these are located to ensure that we're providing access to key destinations, trying to locate these in areas with higher density, multi-unit complexes, things like that, where people are actually going to use bike share. Next slide, please. This is just to share what the typical installation details might look like. On the right-hand side, you can see some of the diagrams and specs that call out, for example, the 6-foot pedestrian through zone adjacent to the station on the sidewalk, the general station dimensions, as well as an 18-inch setback from curb face. This is actually a red curb location, so parking isn't as much of an issue. Generally, in areas with parking conflicts, we go for a little bit of a further curb setback so that it doesn't tangle with the door zone as people are getting in and out of vehicles. Additionally, we look at visibility so that we're ensuring that bike share isn't impeding sight lines at an intersection. And lastly, one of the things that we consider is how to most efficiently use the space. And on the left, you'll see the picture of the after installation. This is for our records, so we know kind of what orientation we chose, et cetera. But it shows that we did a diagonal installation here to minimize ingress into the pedestrian through zone in that sidewalk area. So we have a lot of flexibility with the 3.0 docks as far as orientation and how we locate them. Next slide, please. So the program launched on January 28th of this year, and so far we've seen some pretty impressive statistics with about 283 docks and around 140 bikes in service at 52 stations. As of the end of September, we had over 50,000 trips taken on B-Cycle. Over 10,000 riders traveled over 206,000 miles. And just to put that in perspective, crossing the country is around a 3,000-mile trip. So B-Cycle riders in Santa Barbara have effectively crossed the US about 68 times, which is pretty amazing when you think about only 140 bikes being in service. One of the things that we look at as well in the ridership metrics is the percentage of single or walk-up riders versus membership riders. Since launch, we've been hovering at about 50-50, and now we're getting closer to about 40% walk-up riders and about 60% membership riders. And our hope is that as we continue moving forward and do some further installations in neighborhoods, those membership numbers will in fact increase. Next slide, please. This is a map of our existing bike share network. Black locations have already been installed. Red locations are pending. And that could mean that they've been reviewed by our traffic engineer and they don't have visibility issues, but they might still need community outreach prior to implementation. And we've also seen some dock delays, which I'll get into further in the presentation. But as you can see, the network is starting to take shape and we're really starting to see a lot more access to bike share in the city. Next slide, please. As far as pricing, we've kind of gone back and forth with B-Cycle and even council on this, but right now we have a pretty good pricing system set up in that there are 3 different memberships available. There's an annual, a monthly, and a low income. And all of those memberships include free unlimited 30-minute rides. So when you've paid the membership, you get unlimited 30-minute rides. After that 30 minutes, it's $3 for every subsequent 30 minutes. We do offer a low income membership for only $25 a year if you meet the qualifications. And then we also have a walk-up or single-use ride cost, which is $7 for every 30 minutes. And just to put things in perspective, rental shops in town generally charge around $20 to $25 an hour for an e-bike rental. And I'll get into that a little bit more in coming slides. Next slide, please. Prior to bringing bike share to the city of Santa Barbara, we knew there were some challenges. Docked versus dockless, some of the aesthetic impacts of dockless systems, certainly some of the ADA impacts of dockless systems. Just as recently as 2016, the South Coast Bike Share Feasibility Study estimated that it would cost over $2 million in upfront cost to bring bike share to Santa Barbara. And with those considerations and also kind of questioning, is bike share going to work in Santa Barbara? Will this be viable? it took a while to get bike share here and to gain the traction to really try this. And that's part of the reason that we elected to move forward with a 3-year pilot program, is to really see, is this a good fit? And, you know, we have some concerns. So let's try it out in Santa Barbara and see how well it fits for our city. Next slide, please. So we had some previously identified challenges, and now in implementation and implementation, we've seen some other challenges as well. In the near term, bringing bike share stations to an area requires significant city review. There's a lengthy permitting process, and once a station is selected that meets our parameters, there's also tremendous business and neighborhood outreach that's involved. Prior to installing bike share on State Street, we spoke with pretty much every business along the State Street corridor, just to kind of let them know what bike share was, and that was a big lift on the staff front. Additionally, we're hearing some concerns about bikes in general on the temporary State Street Promenade, as well as on the Cabrillo Beachway, and more specifically about electric bikes on those two facilities, and concerns about, you know, the perception that an electric bike is a higher speed vehicle, or something that we need to work out moving forward. And again, not exactly pertaining to bike share, but it's just a general public consensus that we're hearing about bikes and e-bikes in particular. Next slide, please. We've also seen a number of operational challenges. Since System launched, we've had around 25 bikes that have been abandoned or stolen. Of those, 4 have not been recovered to date. We've seen 5 batteries that have been stolen off the vehicles, and over 40 bikes with minor damages ranging from snipped brake cables to grips that have been cut off to other forms of vandalism. On the right, you'll see the Hall of Fame over at B-Cycle, which are frames that they've recovered completely stripped of components. Additionally, there was one system crash. This was an acute instance where the network was essentially down for about 2 days. And from an operational standpoint, it's a pretty dramatic event when you're trying to build consumer confidence in this as a viable transportation option. So we do pay attention to system downtime. Additionally, we've seen 3 reported collisions on B-Cycles, 2 of which actually involved people being transported to the hospital. So just something to think about. And then lastly, I mentioned this before, but we've seen a number of pretty intense COVID delays as a result of global microchip shortages. We had been scheduled to receive a new batch of docs about 2 months ago, and our hope is that they'll be here in mid-November. But again, that's a moving target. So hence a lot of those red pending dock locations on the previous map. And then lastly, the city of Santa Barbara has been fairly restrictive about the use and I guess aesthetics of B-Cycle. We worked with them to really minimize the aesthetic impacts of bike share in the city. We actually reduced the size of their logo quite a bit, and we developed some proprietary designs for the city of Santa Barbara bikes that are really different from other bike shares. And one of the things that a lot of other bike shares rely on is sponsorship and advertising. You can see below an example of a bike share. This is actually a B-Cycle station that has a massive ad on one of the wayfinding signs, and that just doesn't fit in the city. So we've really reduced and limited the capacity for B-Cycle to do that here. And there are, challenges as far as long-term viability if B-Cycle is not able to gather that ad profit. Next slide, please. Additionally, we've conducted some outreach to local bike shops and bike rental companies in the city. Generally speaking, the bike shops seem to be ambivalent or supportive about bike share. A number of the shops that I spoke with said they have no feeling one way or another, and a few said, I've actually sold, an electric bike to somebody who came in and had tried a B-Cycle and wanted an electric bike that was better suited to them and their needs. So again, generally ambivalent or supportive. The rental company front is a very different story. We do have a shop, a couple shops actually, that also rent bikes in addition to having a retail space. And they said, it's maybe a bit of a different market between somebody who's renting a bike and somebody who's using bike share. Some of the shops that do rent say I include a helmet and a lock, or I sanitize my bikes, or it's just a little bit of a different operation. But the dedicated bike rental companies, both of whom I spoke with, mentioned just a perceived dip in shorter duration e-bike rentals that they felt was the result of B-Cycle launching in the city. And definitely the consensus that B-Cycle's pricing structure at $14 for an hour for an e-bike rental undercuts their pricing structure at $20 to $25 an hour. So it's something we're aware of, and we're having those conversations and hope to continue the dialogue. And I just wanted to point out on the right-hand side of the screen, you'll see a sticker that was affixed on the concrete along Cabrillo in front of a bike share location, essentially, saying if you are a tourist in Santa Barbara, please support your local bike rental shops instead of bike share. So we are hearing some negative comments here. Next slide, please. We are about 9 months into a 3-year pilot program for bike share, and to date, we're fairly pleased with the results. I mentioned some really impressive ridership statistics, but I also think it's important to point out that these data are really only relevant in Santa Barbara. And it's difficult as a result to compare the success of our bike share operation in Santa Barbara to another bike share operation in a different city. Some of the reasons for that are that even though we're 9 months since launch, we're really only at about 50% capacity. And much of our initial focus was on building up access to key destinations in the downtown core. And as we get further out into neighborhoods and as we expand the network, we hope that we'll start to see more membership rides, things like that. But we need to continue to evaluate station performance, membership versus walk-up numbers, and continue to have conversation with stakeholders to really know how well this program is doing in the city. Next slide, please. I'd just like to mention that recently there have been some early discussions on the potential for a regional bike share system. We've talked to partners in Carpinteria and SB-CAG, as far north as Solvang, actually, about what the potential for a regional bike share system could be. These are very early conversations, but I think it's important to point out how linked our community is to our neighbors in Goleta and UCSB, and to look at some of the potential for a regional discussion for bike share. Bike share, again, is only 9 months into the pilot program. We will return to council about 1 year from launch, so sometime next spring, and we will be reporting out to council annually thereafter, and then probably coming back to TCC at some point in the future as well. Next slide, please. With that, I'd like to conclude my presentation, and we would be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Okay, committee members, I do have a couple questions, but I'll go last. Anyone have any questions? Andre?
I appreciated that presentation. I think you mentioned something earlier around, wear and tear or vandalism to the bikes, and Santa Barbara faring a little bit better than maybe comparable cities. I was just kind of curious on a couple fronts. One, what's like the lifespan of these electric bicycles, and what a little bit more details on maintenance and compared to other cities?
Great question, Committee Member Malavos. I would say on average, and I'll have to check with B-Cycle exactly, but if I recall, it's around a 3-year lifespan for a bike share bike. B-Cycle tends to get longer lifespans than a lot of dockless companies, just because they have a little bit more control over where the bikes are and who they're checked out to. But touching at some of your other points, Maintenance, the B-Cycle does have a shop here in town, so they have somebody that has hands and eyes on the bike pretty much every day. They go out and swap batteries in the field, both for the bikes and the docks. The docks also have a Li-ion rechargeable battery that can be recharged every 2 to 3 months. So with that system in place, B-Cycle is spending a lot of time in the field, and anytime there's a flat tire, whether it's reported or not through the app, it's brought back to the shop, and that problem is resolved. These are municipal quality bike share bikes. All the hardware is anti-theft. They do as much as they can to protect wires and things like that. And B-Cycle is working to constantly iterate their bike share bike. That being said, some of the more recent thefts that we've seen, somebody just took a grinder or a Sawzall and cut the frame to remove the battery. And there's nothing you can do to prevent someone from doing that. So we have seen some kind of more brazen theft and vandalism. I will say that B-Cycle uses a tracker. They have a GPS unit of sorts in their bike, so they can locate these bikes when they go missing, and tend to be really responsive even on the weekend to go and collect those bikes.
Very nice. Thank you.
Excuse me, Ms. Blackerby, please go ahead.
Thank you. I have a question about you were showing the percentages of rides that are walk up versus membership, monthly or annual. How many monthly memberships do we have at this point and annual? And then also wondering about the low income, how many folks are sort of enrolled in that?
Great question, Committee Member Blackerby. I don't have the exact numbers for those memberships in front of me, but I can, and referring you to the slide in front of us now, state that around 41% of those trips taken to date were done by members, by monthly members, and around 16% by annual members. One of the challenging and interesting components to looking at bike share data is that you could have, for example, a tourist that comes to town from somewhere else that decides to buy a monthly membership for $30 because it's more cost effective than buying 5 single ride passes. Similarly, we've done some really early data dives into zip codes associated with billing, and we found out that a significant proportion of those single ride trips are actually from Santa Barbara zip codes. Goleta, City of Santa Barbara. So it's really hard to extract meaningful data without getting to a really granular level, which we're starting to figure out if we can do. And again, I think as we move forward, I would like to extract that a little bit more and better understand those membership behaviors. As to the low income, we haven't really leveraged that program to the fullest. We were in conversations with Casa de la Raza to do a Spanish language radio spot. They've gone dark, and we're trying to figure out the best way to build that program up. So I don't have the numbers on how many low income members we have, but it's something that city staff and B-Cycle are interested in promoting.
Okay, and as far as I don't care as much if it's locals or if it's people in from out of town or whatever who are using them. So yeah, it would be good to know just sort of period, like annual memberships versus monthly. Because when I have an annual membership, when I talk to people and tell them how much it is versus like a walk up, they're like, oh my God. I had a conversation with a bus driver today. He's like, what? I would have joined a long time ago, right? Had I known. So I think that price is definitely in the sweet spot for this. So yeah, it'd be interesting to know and to track not just rides, but actual individual memberships and stuff. So thank you.
Would anyone else like to have any questions? Mr. Collum, go ahead.
Yes, and then Ian actually, sorry. Committee Member Bauke should be after me if you didn't notice. So Mr. Furtner, from a vandalism and theft perspective, are the numbers that we're seeing concerning? And then, you know, if they are there going to be additional measures taken to sort of, you know, try to mitigate that? I mean, I don't know what other measures could be taken in terms of like cameras and docks or things like that. And if they are, who would it be? B-Cycle, or would it be the city that would bear the brunt of that cost? And then, you know, what, obviously outside the scope of this committee, but what enforcement measures are being taken in terms of vandalism and theft that has been seen so far?
Excellent question, Committee Member Collum. Well, I guess I would say I'll answer this in multiple ways. B-Cycle is a proprietary bike share company. So they are providing all of the bikes, and they're providing the management on the ground as well for the city of Santa Barbara. We have a relatively moderate fee structure, which is about $15 per bike annually, that's meant to account for staff time for management of the program. But essentially, B-Cycle is operating for no cost for the city of Santa Barbara. So they are responsible for responses to theft and vandalism and managing that on their back end. I would say from my conversations with B-Cycle about other bike share systems in the country, it totally depends. You know, in Florida, they have bikes that end up in the ocean all the time. In Madison, Wisconsin, they haven't seen the battery theft that we've seen here, and that is a little bit concerning moving forward. Each one of those batteries is about $500, so that's a pretty substantial cost to bear from just a few thefts. So there's room to improve on the vandalism front, but one of the challenges of that obviously is enforcement. One of the things that B-Cycle has done to pivot and adapt to the theft of bikes is adding tracking ability, so they can see in real time where these things are and go get them if needed. But it is part of the game of kind of cat and mouse of B-Cycle trying to figure out where bikes are going and, you know, seeing challenging patterns or behaviors and trying to respond to that. So long term, from my conversations with B-Cycle, it sounds like generally there's a growing pains period where this is a lot more common at the beginning of a bike share coming to a city, and it tends to peter out after a while, or diminish at least.
Okay, thank you for that overview. Just to put my naivete on full display, in the bicycle master plan, when I was reviewing it and seeing kind of the cost structure for even the smaller projects and then, you know, larger ones like this, I think it listed it as, I would have to review, but I think 3 million. So if B-Cycle is bearing that cost, where is that cost to the city coming from?
Well, I would answer this by posing a different question, I suppose, Committee Member Collum, which is bike share did not happen in Santa Barbara for a decade because of that $3 million price point. And when the city submitted the request for applications and we received a number of essentially no cost proposals to operate in, you know, one of the nicest cities on the West Coast, if not the country, we elected to try it as a pilot program. And again, I hinted at that a little bit from the advertising and sponsorship side of things, but this is a pilot program. In other cities, what's happened is, for example, I believe in Austin, they actually had a nonprofit that was formed that took over management of the bike share system and essentially purchased it from B-Cycle. So 3 years down the road, I think that's a question we're all starting to think about, is what is the long-term cost to the city as far as keeping this here and making sure that they have enough revenue to be viable years down the road. And that's, you know, again, we're 9 months in. Most of our time has been focused on getting them up and running, getting the stations installed. And I think we're just now starting to think about those longer term ramifications.
Okay, thank you so much for the overview, Mr. Ferner.
Does our newest member have a question? Go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Awesome presentation. I learned a lot. I'm very interested in this program. If you could go back to the slide that had the current docks and the pending, dock locations in the city. I guess I'm selfishly asking, in this 3-year pilot window, is there any prospect that the red part of this map expands further into the neighborhood? So, for example, if you're further up in San Roque or in Hidden Valley like me, is there any prospect that B-Cycle or the city or whoever kind of moves the ball initially on picking these locations is going to, expand from this map?
Excellent question, committee member Bauke, is that correct?
Yeah.
As far as pronunciation?
Yeah.
Yes. Again, as I mentioned, we're just over 50% capacity for the system. I think we have 283 docks installed right now, and we should have 500 for the total pilot program. So we will be expanding far beyond the dots you see on the screen here. The question is where? Part of station siting involves just finding enough room on a sidewalk where there's actually space to put bike share. It's been surprisingly challenging, especially on the west side, where we have a lot of narrow sidewalks. So moving forward, I think the program has a lot of potential to expand. It's just a matter of finding locations that meet our parameters for installation and serve, a populace that is going to use them. One of the things that we also look at is station performance. And, we don't want to see a station that we've installed somewhere underperforming. So especially with a docked system, one of the challenges is station density. If you put a 2-dock station on the west side and one person takes a bike out of it, that station is essentially empty because one of those docks actually needs to remain empty to receive somebody coming to that location. So the way that we minimize the aesthetic impact in Santa Barbara is by not having rows of 25 bikes, which a lot of other municipalities have done. The great thing about that is that there's always a bike there and there's always a space to park a bike. And you know that. But when you look at our network on the screen in front of you, you can see how many little stations we have. The majority of our stations are 6 docks or less. So building that density is critical to having this as a viable transportation option. And it has been one of the biggest hurdles is just finding available real estate in the right of way that meets our parameters and will serve a population. But my hope is that with the other remaining 200 plus dock installations that we can continue to expand this neighborhood. Expand this into neighborhoods and other areas throughout the city.
Okay, great. I have another question after this, but just to clarify, so is the city the primary identifier of where they want to put new docks, or is B-Cycle, have suggestions that they come up with from a business perspective, or kind of who starts that process?
Excellent question. The short of it is that we work very closely with B-Cycle. A number of the stations were proposed by B-Cycle, but as the locals in the equation, city staff have been very key in informing the location of a lot of bike share locations. We work very closely together. And additionally, we always appreciate community member feedback. Station requests are a great way to facilitate bringing bike share to locations. Especially early on in the program, we got a lot of negative community feedback about some of the proposed locations. We've actually relocated stations due to business feedback or resident feedback. There's a perception that bike share in some way will change the usage of a neighborhood or a street. So yeah, we love to get community feedback that says, hey, bring bike share to my neighborhood. I would welcome that. And B-Cycle does have a request capability on their website, or certainly committee members or general public can reach out to myself or our team for that conversation.
Okay, great, thanks. And then my other question, committee member Column, I hope that's right, kind of touched on the revenue and expenditure piece of this, but I'm just curious, when it comes to the membership fees and the single-use fees, does 100% of that go to B-Cycle, or does the city get cut of that pays for part of the expenses? Or I'm just kind of curious where the cost burden lies?
All of the revenue from this program goes to B-Cycle. They are the program operator and responsible for maintenance and everything. So everything goes to them.
Okay, gotcha. And then last, real quick, when I'm still trying to figure out the shared mobility ordinance and like the history behind that, especially as it relates to scooters versus bikes and kind of how they're seen differently. Is this program kind of from the process of that ordinance, is it identical to what, say, a scooter company that wanted to do something with all of these kind of mitigations like docking, which some of them do now, would they come in with the same kind of proposal based off the ordinance, or was this kind of a one-off thing? The city council wanted one specific bike share pilot in particular?
That's a great question. Just a little bit of history on that. When we developed the shared mobility ordinance, the intent was to be adaptive and to be able to cover whatever the next trend in shared mobility is. And the way to do that is to have a broad shared mobility ordinance and then to develop specific rules and regulations for specific types of shared mobility. So during the drafting of this ordinance, we heard from council a general sentiment that scooters in their current iteration were somewhat unsafe, and that dockless and rogue scooter launches weren't exactly what we wanted to see in Santa Barbara. The patterns of traumatic head injuries, just generally it wasn't looking good. At that time, though, they also said, we feel this way about scooters, but we would like to see a pilot bike share program. So at that point, staff drafted rules and regulations to manage a pilot bike share program. That has not been done yet for a scooter program. So that would be the first step prior to moving forward with something like this for a different type of shared mobility.
Gotcha. And then just real quickly, I have noticed the past few months, sort of seems like it's marketed more towards tourists, the blue e-scooters down State Street. Is that done through the ordinance? I wasn't able to find anything about that anywhere. So I'm just curious if that relates to this at all.
Yeah, good observation. That's something that we are in conversations with the company. They're called Sweep, and they are essentially offering an on-demand bike and scooter rental. The challenge of this is that because they're on demand and because they do have a brick and mortar location in the city, they're technically the same as a bike rental company, and they do not fall under the regulations of the shared mobility ordinance. But we have seen an increasing proliferation of the scooters and those rental bikes as well in town. And I know that will be a topic of conversation in the future.
Yeah, I'm sure it will be. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. That's all for me.
Excellent questions. Ms. Horn.
Okay, I just had a question. If just thinking about the vandalism and stealing thing, what is the situation with video surveillance in our city? Is it prohibited, or I don't know. I just wondered if there is a way to do some kind of surveillance of the docking places.
Councilmember Horn, I can't weigh in on citywide regulations regarding video surveillance, but I do know that there are surveillance systems on private property. I don't know about surveillance in the public right of way. That might be a little bit different. And I think it's something that could be considered moving forward. But again, there's a lot of expense. We have 52 different station locations. I don't know if B-Cycle would be interested in that or not.
Yeah, just wondered if it was feasible or not. Sounds like it's really not.
Yeah. Committee Member Horn, this is Cliff Maurer. I'd just like to chime in on that. I mean, it's a great question, and I think the correct answer is it's very complicated. Because once the city starts collecting data, it's available for public records requests and other. The city attorney would have to be deeply involved in creating, and the city council would have to create ordinances that would have to express exactly how that data is used, when it can be used, when it can be accessed. And as you can imagine, other cities have tried this with the greatest intent for the public good, and they've gone very far awry because people with nefarious intent have gotten a hold of that data through public records requests and all, and used it for different reasons. So it just gets very complicated.
We're not going to be
Especially,
like London.
in California.
Okay. Yeah.
Well, that's a big question, isn't it? Do we have any other committee member questions? I have one that I'll wrap up with, if not. Okay, Mr. Ferdinand, the only thing I wanted to ask about is the train station. Do we have any bikes at the train station, and will those possibly be increased? And I guess I have a piggyback question. What happened to the commuter train? I mean, with COVID, I just forgot about the commuter train that we tried for 20 years to get. And then, so can you update that real quickly?
I can provide an anecdotal update, Chair Rodriguez, which is that I heard there
Thank
was
you.
semblance of a rumor that might be coming back, but I don't know when. I can reach out to my contacts at SBCAG to get a little bit more detail on that. We've been curious as well for city employees that used to use that commuter train. But that's the bad news. The good news is that we do now have bike share at the Amtrak station. We installed 6 docks on October 5th. Within half an hour of the last screw being attached, people were checking bikes out. And so far it's been successful. I think it's one of the more beautiful bike share locations in the city. And once Amtrak service and public transit service resumes in full, I think we will see a lot of usage at that station. And I just wanted to add one thing, which is that I mentioned this earlier, but we do monitor station performance. We look at the number of rides and how many times the bikes are checked out from each dock in pretty much everywhere across the city. And one of the things that we recommend is station expansion if we feel that we're not capturing all of the ridership that could be there. We are trying to minimize the aesthetic impacts, but there have been a couple of locations where we've actually built out stations in smaller groups. We did one on the west side just recently. We went from a 4-dock location and we added 4 more docks just slightly down the street because we were seeing a lot of ridership from that location. So my hope is in looking at Amtrak that, if we see more ridership and it warrants an expansion, we could have that conversation down the road.
Well, thank you. If there are no more questions, we could go to public comment. Ms. Blackerby, do you have? No. Okay, thank you. Michelle.
Thank you, Madam Chair. At this time, there are no raised hands. We still have a few members of the public in attendance. So I'd just like to take a moment to remind the public that if you wish to speak on this item and you would like to raise your hand, you can click the hand icon and that'll indicate to me that you would like to speak, and you would have 2 minutes. At this time, I don't see anybody clicking and raising their hand. So back to you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. At this time, would the committee like to make any wrap-up comments about Mr. Furtner's presentation? Excellent presentation. Ms. Horn.
No, just thank you.
Ms. Blackerby.
Thanks, and thanks, Mr. Fertner, for a great presentation, really comprehensive, and it's great to see how far we've come in 9 months. And I know it didn't just start 9 months ago. And you know, I want to give big kudos to you for all the work that you've done personally on this. I know it's not easy, and you're the guy doing it. You know, obviously there's a company, but there's not many actual individuals, you know, involved in this, so it's very impressive. You know, I want to say it's been, you know, on the work side of things. Anytime a station is proposed near a bus stop, Sam calls, sends the slide that shows where it would be. That's huge. I mean, that's, you know, kind of collaboration that's necessary to make everyone, you know, keep everyone happy. And I know that takes time, so I appreciate that. I've got a annual membership. It's been great. It really has sort of enriched how I get around. I have my own bike and I ride that, but sometimes I'm not, you know, making a round trip, or I want to get somewhere and not be quite as sweaty as I would on my bike with no gears. So it's nice to have an e-bike. And it's just, I've thought about bike share in Santa Barbara for a really long time and thought about how it could be a disaster. And I've seen it be a disaster in other places. I think the docks are perfect. It's like, if, you know, and if the perfect dock had been created, you know, like for Santa Barbara, I think they nailed it. It just fits. It looks good, but you also can find them, right? Sometimes we're so good at making things like aesthetically pleasing in Santa Barbara that we hide them. So these are still at least noticeable. I think the bikes look great. The bikes are the most like sturdy bike share bikes I've ever tried. They keep them up. You know, I think it's sort of fair to guess that 9 months or a year later, with all the usage we've had, they might be a little rickety, but they really aren't, or I haven't experienced that yet. You know, you mentioned wanting to do work on the low income pass. I appreciate that, because I've, you know, noticed and checked out the website and everything. If you go to get a pass, that's not mentioned. And on the front page of the website, it has, you know, low income pass for $25 a year. See if you qualify by emailing us, right? So it's like, well, how about you just tell me how I qualify? And then I guess I'll email you. Emailing, as silly as it seems, getting someone to send an email is actually like a decent barrier when there could be, you know, a form or something on the website. And it's something that I know was talked about before they launched, and I would hope that the company, I know it takes money out of their pocket, right? Because that could be maybe someone who would pay $150, but I've talked to a lot of people in this city who, even the $150, right? I mean, that's an upfront cost. $30 is an upfront cost that some people just can't commit to. But there are a lot of people who could really use some good mobility, right? That they don't have access to now, or they don't have a way to maintain a bike. I've been asked by so many people, all kinds of people, when I go and dock a bike, they're like, wait, what does it cost? What's the deal? So I'm like giving pitches all the time. And when I talk to people who, you know, I know are low income, I'm kind of like, there is a program, but like, look it up, you know? So I think that's sort of the only real deficit I see in the program, but I hope that in the next little bit that can be focused on. And yeah, looking forward to those additional docks and additional bikes. Only a couple times have I been caught either, oh no, all the docks are full, or oh no, there's no bikes here, and had to sort of make other plans. But it's the Amtrak station, that was great. And I can tell they're being well used because I go past it every day, and there's, you know, they're always in flux. So it's great to see. So congratulations. I know there's a long way to go, but I would say, you know, all the different nightmare scenarios I thought were possible, pretty much none of them have happened. So congratulations on that. And I don't think they will happen. So thanks.
Ms. Horn?
Hi, Sam. I wanted to follow up on Hillary's question about the $25 low price passes. Anna, are you there? I
am here, yeah.
hi. I just, I agree that that is a barrier if it says to email. And I just wondered if, is that supposed to be a secret to keep people from abusing it, or why? I mean, can you just tell us right now, is there a means, an income limit, or what is it that you need to require to find out if a person qualifies? I don't know what your criteria is.
Excellent question, Committee Member Horn. The general criteria that we identified was whether an individual falls within the 200th percentile of federal poverty guidelines. And so the challenge with that is that it's fairly confusing, and it's not straightforward whether you qualify for that. It depends on how many people are in your family or your household. There's a number of different parameters. I believe it's somewhere buried on the B-Cycle website, or maybe it's just because I have seen the form myself, but it's fairly straightforward on the form. And that being said, I know B-Cycle is in conversations with Coast and SB Bike to develop that component of the program. And part of the reason that it hasn't been more marketed previously is just the bandwidth that it takes that we've experienced to get everything up and running into where it is right now. But those conversations are happening, and the need to really dispense that information across a broad public audience is critical. It's something that I'm talking to B-Cycle about regularly. So we're working on it. We just haven't figured out the best path forward yet.
And Committee Member Horn, I wanted to add that we have had some media pushes through City News and Brief, through Nextdoor, to advertise that, but just for your comments that we're hearing this evening, that we can continue to resume that. So it's not meant to be a one and done communication. As Sam said, we're continuing to work with stakeholder groups to continually push the message.
Yeah, I mean, you might even have something as simple as the chart, that they use for qualifying for Medicaid or Medi-Cal or something like that, where they have, number of people in your family, and then there's a list of what the income would be, to qualify. I mean, it's not that hard if you just put yourself in the place of someone that wants to know the information and try it out.
I would just like to add, Committee Member Horn, that I recently sat on a panel discussing equity and shared mobility, and some of the tips that I took from that were the potential to just say, if you qualify for an existing SNAP or food assistance program, you qualify for this low-income bike share. So I think there's room to improve, certainly the messaging, and it's something that we're working on.
Great, good to hear it. Thanks.
Any other questions at this point? I'm sorry, it's getting late. Am I at questions or committee comments?
Madam Chair, it is comments. So if there was any other comments.
I would like to wrap up on the comments with kind of on a couple of notes. First of all, I will, not to belabor the point, but when you said that you have to email to find out if you're on the low income, that's inconsistent. Some of the people who need it the most may not even have computers or email at all. So that's very challenging, but it sounds like you're working on it, Mr. Fertner. I appreciate it. And I would like to add that the other day I was on Anacapa near my yoga class with a friend, and the e-bike fellow came in his van to drop off some bikes. So I asked him a lot of questions without telling him that I was on a committee that wanted to know about his program. And I must say that he was a very positive young man, very enthusiastic about his job. He was unloading obviously freshly fixed up bikes or repaired or whatever, just relocating them or something. And he was very excited about his work and excited about the whole bike share program. So the company gets a little kudos from me for, I was like a secret shopper. Snuck in on him.
Well, thank you.
Okay.
Madam Chair, I just wanted to add one last comment and just really to commend
Please.
Mr. Fortner for all his hard work.
Oh.
We are a small and mighty team, but Mr. Fortner has really been ground zero at this effort, and it is much appreciated, and we've appreciated the help of the B-Cycle team to get this program running to see if it works for the city. So Madam Chair, I think before we go into our last item, may I suggest maybe an 8-minute health break where we resume at 8 p.m.?
Sounds good.
Okay.
ladies and gentlemen, we are on to our last item, the Measure A Cycle 5 grant application. And for the newer members, I just want the other things we've been doing have been receiving reports. In this one, we will be making a motion at the end of the discussion to hopefully to accept this, I'm sorry, to endorse this grant application. So our enthusiastic support is what the staff needs. That's the, trying to think of the right words. That's the support that they need from our committee going forward to the city council. So with that in mind, Jessica, are you, Ms. Grant, are you going to present this one?
Yes, Chair Rodriguez, I will be presenting once again on the Measure A Cycle 5 grant applications.
Thank
and
you.
as Chair Rodriguez had mentioned, this is the latest cycle of grants that was just announced last Thursday, with pre-applications being due November 16th and final applications due February 1st. Just a little background about the Measure A grant program. The voters in Santa Barbara County had approved a sales tax measure, transportation measure known as Measure A back in 2008. As part of this program, there was grant funding available in two programs called the Bicycle and Pedestrian Program and the Safe Routes to School Program. Over the years, this is cycle 5, we've received from the South County portions ranging between probably around 1.3 million to 1.6 million. For this cycle, for each program, 1.6 million will be available. And the eligible applicants for this grant are the cities of Carpinteria, Goleta, Santa Barbara, and County of Santa Barbara. School districts, universities, colleges, transit agencies, and Caltrans are also eligible to compete for this funding source as well, with a city or county partnership. And for these projects, there are approximately, for the max for each project, is 400,000 that you could receive from this source. So it's a smaller source of money compared to like the active transportation program, but it is a very valued source by our city. I'm not going to go over all of these projects, but to date in the past 4 cycles, we have been awarded approximately $2.5 million in grant funding. This funding source has been instrumental in a lot of our Safe Routes to School safety projects and sidewalk infill projects. And we've also worked with the schools on some smaller projects like getting bike racks to Santa Barbara High and Adams Elementary. So again, it's been a very valued source because, as I mentioned, with the bicycle master plan, and when we're looking at capital funding, our capital funds are very limited. Again, we get approximately $3 million a year in our capital programming budget. Most of it goes to pavement maintenance and maintaining existing infrastructure that we have. So without this grant source, we wouldn't have been able to do all of these wonderful projects. Given this grant source and the rubrics, we do have a couple projects that we are interested in moving forward. We feel that these projects would compete well against the rest of our competition. And this is a very competitive grant source. So I'm going to go over first the bicycle and pedestrian program of projects. The first being the MODOC multi-use path. Again, it's a more expensive project. It's that we estimate around 900,000. The city would be doing the other matching monies, but the Measure A grant request we'd be interested is the maximum of 400,000. So let's talk about that one in just a minute. The other project is the West Side to Lower West Bike Route Completion Project, and I'll go through that one next. Similar thing where we're requesting the full amount, 400,000, and we anticipate ballpark at this time. We haven't gone to full detail cost estimates yet, but we think it's in the ballpark of the $600,000 range. So let's start with the MODOC multi-use path extensions. So as you saw in an earlier presentation, I discussed the Las Positas MODOC multi-use path project. That's a portion, at least on MODOC, that is shown in the dark black line here. And there is about a 500-foot missing gap between the county's project for a multi-use path. So how did that happen? Well, when we wrote the design and environmental grant for the project and went into design, at that point the county did not have their capital project. It was still very much just in part of their planning effort, but there hadn't been any funding. So we had to determine where would we start in this bike route, and the logical location to start the multi-use path was the last main intersection before we hit the county line, which is Calle de los Amigos and MODOC. And so that's why it started there. Super happy. The County of Santa Barbara was also able to receive an active transportation program grant to continue that same multi-use path that would connect north along MODOC and then to the Oberon Trail. Then that takes you all the way up to UCSB, Goleta. It's great. And so their piece, it will be phased, but the next coming to construction in approximately fiscal year 22-23 would be this segment. And so we have about a 500 linear gap of missing infrastructure. We're trying to get that online right now. We have a consultant team doing analysis, city to do the design. Just to show you again where that gap is in photos, this is just a Google Street image taken. You can see the path that's under construction has now since been paved, but the rocks here, that would actually be the paved multi-use path. Again, it ends at Calle de los Amigos. But then the proposed path would continue on along this stretch right here. If you see, can everybody see my mouse? Yes, okay. So this tree right here is approximately where the city-county line is. This is just a little bit closer up. So right about here is the city-county line that we would design up to. That's where the county's multi-use project starts. For the most part, from a design standpoint, it's fairly easy to design up until this standpoint. Then there's a big drop-off right here that's in a big ravine, probably right after that guardrail. There's probably 100 or so feet down where there's a water course. So what we're doing right now is investigating what it would look like to site the path right there. So that's, even though it's 500 feet, it's a very expensive piece for that very reason right in that section. So again, we do not want to have that gap in infrastructure. We see Measure A as being a good candidate to put that final piece and hopefully come to fruition. The next bicycle and pedestrian project that we're interested in applying for is the West Side to Lower West bike completion route. This is something that's come out of the West Side and Lower West transportation management planning effort that we did recently in 2020 that you reviewed. Council adopted the plan. What we noticed and what we've heard from the community is we need a stronger connection to get to the West Side and Lower West Side neighborhoods. So as discussed earlier in the bicycle master plan, there with the West Side Community Paseos, there will be one of the bike-friendly streets being installed on Gillespie Street, and then it ends right at Gillespie and Victoria. So we're trying to then pick up from that piece and then get residents over to the Lower West neighborhood, which then subsequently connects to the waterfront. So a really important piece of infrastructure connection. Going to run through what that looks like. So over here, this is where the bike-friendly street ends for the bicycle boulevard. Bike riders will again share the road with vehicles, fairly low volume along Victoria Street. They'll keep going past the Chino intersection. We're doing a little bit different treatment at Chino and Victoria to encourage stop compliance. They'll be installed with raised medians here. And then you'll get to Mercedes Lane. Mercedes Lane is a parallel street to San Andres. What we've heard from the community too, right in that one section of San Andres, and well, in San Andres overall, it's one of our our priority corridors for Vision Zero, but it's a very vehicular dominated street. So sometimes on the bike friendly streets, we look to see if there's good parallel connection routes to connect the community to different neighborhoods. Mercedes Lane is a very low volume street that residents can travel down. And then we're proposing a multi-use path at Mercedes and Carrillo. So let's go there. It's just a little piece that is along Carrillo, and it's between Mercedes Lane and San Andres. So riders will go along this path, and then they'll come to the newly improved intersection at Carrillo and San Andres Street that's currently under construction. We'll have wayfinding route markings here. And then they'll go to a new on-street bike lane along San Andres to Canon Perdido. And then from there, they'll navigate on the existing network here, where Wentworth is a very bike-friendly corridor, and then Rancheria, that was one of our low-cost bike improvements where we have an on-street bike lane. So a little bit of a weave through these two neighborhoods, but we definitely see a need to strengthen that connection. So that is the other recommendation for the bike pedestrian program. So now on to the Safe Routes to School program applications. Again, just like Bike and Ped, it's 1.6 million that is available to the South Coast cities and county of Santa Barbara. We're recommending 3 projects, 2 of which you read in your staff report. We had a recent addition this week that I'll explain further. So the first one is San Andres Safe Crossings and Lighting. The second is Santa Barbara Junior High Multi-Use Path on Long Coda. And the latest addition is Monte Vista Safe Crossings and Lighting Project. So the San Andres Safe Crossings and Lighting Project, that's another item that came out of the West Side and Laura West Transportation Management Plan, really to have strong pedestrian crossings across San Andres. The two intersections that we're recommending for Measure A funding that I think would compete well is the crossing improvements at Victoria and San Andres and Anapamu and San Andres. Why are those intersections so important? They're really key routes to get to Harding Elementary and needing to get from Harding Elementary back home. And there's a lot of apartments on the other side of Bonet Park. And in addition, in that vicinity of Bonet Park is the Boys and Girls Club. So again, that's a big program for after school programming and very popular intersections to cross for families. We were fortunate through a highway safety program grant to receive funding to do improvements at Sola and San Andres. Again, these are three very key intersections that we see improvements happening. This is just an existing image at Victoria and San Andres. What is in the background is Bonet Park. What we did immediately when we were doing our field reviews during the West Side and Lower West planning effort, we immediately extended red curb at this intersection to have better sight lines because we saw so many families crossing here. The sight lines were poor, so that was just a just do it item that we did. But there's a lot more opportunities to strengthen the crossing here. So what we propose is to do curb extensions and also rapid flashing beacons for crossing and lighting improvement. This is just, again, a Google Street image of San Andres and Anapamu. Right over here is the Boys and Girls Club. Again, we'd be proposing rapid flashing beacons, curb extensions, and lighting improvements at this intersection as well. The next project that we think would be competitive for this grant source is Santa Barbara Junior High multi-use path on Coda Street. So as I discussed earlier, for the East Side Community Paseos project, where we're having a really strong bike-friendly street along Alisos, and then spurring from Alisos, there will be on-street bike lanes that are existing, but will have some enhancement on those lanes, so Coda and Haley Streets. But there's one section on Coda where we have a gap in our infrastructure. And it is right in front of Santa Barbara Junior High. So we have this really nice protected bike lane. Kids coming from the east side, and when they'll be coming into a new lane off of Alisos on Coda, and then they'll go across Milpas into the protected lane here. For those students, they would turn into the parking lot here because that's where all the bike parking is. But what happens if you're a commuter trying to get to work on during school hours? So this Google image doesn't do it justice. This is not at school time. But during a normal school, this is the drop-off area that the majority of parents drop their students off here. So it is a big mess. And so it's really uncomfortable for a cyclist then to navigate during those busy times. So what cyclists would be able to do is to hop on a multi-use path. It's basically just taking this existing sidewalk and adding about 6 more feet. It's not a bike lane that you're riding fast. This is still a slow connection, but it's a connection where you're not competing against vehicles. This is just a little bit closer up image. Again, this whole area here is your drop-off area. And then eventually, as you come across, this is still the school building. And then you can then, we'd figure out a good connection to then come back right into the bike lane. So there are other students that don't come from the east side, they come from other neighborhoods. And so, and there is a class 1 path on the other side of the junior high here. But instead of them, you know, popping in the lane or getting off, walking their bike, they could still continue on the sidewalk and get to school this way. So here is the additional project, because the grant cycle went live last Thursday just for advertising the grant. We were contacted by the superintendent for the Hope School District, specifically requesting some crossing improvements in front of Monte Vista Elementary on Hope Avenue. And there, as you can see, over here is the front of Monte Vista. There is an existing school crossing here, but what we would propose is to redo and do a high visibility crossing and install rapid flashing beacons here. We are trying in the vicinity of schools to install rapid flashing beacons as an appropriate treatment. And then we also see that there is no street lighting in this section or over the crosswalk, so that would be another addition. As you move up further on the street, this is actually, it's a first generation of rapid flashing beacons. It was, I didn't know this, but it was our first rapid flashing beacons installed in the city of Santa Barbara. But what we also noticed that the street light does not go over the crosswalk well. And so that would be a modification that we would also like to include in the scope of the grant. So in summary, these are the recommended projects to seek funding for the Measure A grant cycle. The grant cycles come every 3 years. And again, the pre-applications are due just in a couple of weeks on November 16th. And then the formal applications are due February 1st. We recommend that the committee endorse the city's Measure A Cycle 5 pedestrian and bicycle and Safe Routes to School grant applications as outlined in the staff report, with the addition of Monte Vista Safe Crossings and Lighting Project. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have. Thank you very much.
Does anyone like to, would anyone like to speak? Ask Ms. Grant any questions? Well, thank you for your, this is a link, this is probably one of our lengthier meetings, folks. I hope, Ian, don't get discouraged. I think I just have one question. Would we expect to get just 1 or 2 of these? I mean, we've got what, five different requests. Is that what's kind of par for the course when you do this?
Great question, Chair Rodriguez. I wouldn't expect them all to get funded. A lot of cases is we get partial funding and maybe 1 or 2 projects funded. It really just ebbs and flows over the years, and it depends of what our fellow sister cities are also proposing. It's hard for this grant source because it's, you know, it is for the smaller projects, but we all have really good projects. And so that's the difficulty with it, but it doesn't hurt trying.
Well, your presentation was very clear, and if we don't have any specific questions, we should probably move to public comment.
Hi, Madam Chair. At this time, there are no hands raised.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, committee comments at this time.
I would just say that having gone to Santa Barbara Junior High, your description of what happens in the drop-off zone is, very accurate. It definitely use that. And also being by that where the MODOC paths extend, that definitely looks like it'd be challenging, but I hope especially that one also gets its funding. I guess just real quick, if it's not too late to ask a question, are the first two projects and then also the school crosswalk project, are they all competing for the same grant source or not separate?
It's still labeled as Measure A, but they're two different programs, pots of money within that program. So yes, you're trying to get the projects on the screen again. So the bicycle and pedestrian program projects would compete against others and not these safe routes to school. So they're in their own leagues of competition.
Okay, gotcha. Thank you so much.
Any other questions or comments? Am I unmuted? Okay, I keep hitting it back and forth, sorry. I'd like to make one comment, and I think this came up in my reviewing this with neighbors, because I live right adjacent to that MODOC multi-use extension. It borders on the condo association right where I live, and it's right across the street from Susan. And it's like, why would it be $900,000 for 500 feet? And the biggest answer to that is that the ravine, as it were, is actually the creek. It's the creek that goes down to Henry's Beach, and it's Arroyo Burro Creek, and we live right on Arroyo Burro Creek, and there's very serious erosion issues with all creeks in Santa Barbara. So making sure that the roadway above the creek is stable is tricky. And this 500-foot extension leads right up to the edge of the eroding creek bank. So I think that's why it's going to cost $900,000. Well, are we ready to, would someone like to move to accept this recommendation?
I'd move that the committee endorse the projects as outlined in the staff report with the addition of the Monte Vista project.
We just need a second.
I'll second.
Was that Ian?
That was me. I'll second, yeah.
Thank you very much. Do we need I think we need, there's Mindy. We need Mindy.
I'll take the roll call vote.
Thank you, thank you.
Committee member Bauke,
Aye.
Ullum,
Aye.
Blackerby,
Aye.
Melevos,
Aye.
Horn,
Aye.
and Chair Rodriguez.
It's an enthusiastic aye. Well, look at that screen, folks. We've made it. Just all participants, thank you so much. This was a long meeting, but I'm very excited about our new members. and our members that aren't brand new, but recently new, a lot of energy on the committee, and it's very exciting for me and for the rest of us who've been here a while. So we will not be meeting again probably till first of the year, just Ms. Grant?
Yes, that's correct, Chair Rodriguez. I believe we kick off in February. We'll be sharing
Okay.
the advanced calendar soon with you all. So yeah, thank you. I know we don't normally have the marathon meetings, but these were all great topics, and thank you for sharing your evening with us tonight.
Well, everyone have a wonderful holiday season, and we'll reconvene in February.
And we want to thank our retiring secretary, especially, and wish you a happy holidays.
Yes, Mindy, you've been terrific.
Thank you.
Terrific. You're welcome. All right, good night all.